graduated, elevated. Now it's my time to shine, yeah, let's go. Major moves, power moves, take it to the top one time, non-stop.
No, I appreciate your responses. So this is my observation. So I've gone on the internet and I've put in nucleotide and I see a lot of papers. So I'm thinking, okay, this is widely researched. Surely, you know, why would you research something that is so widely researched? You know, I'm trying to understand. So, you know, looking at the results, because they're quite similar to yours as well. Obviously, they've looked at China. There's a lot of pig production in China, like we spoke earlier. So why go into a topic or, you know, something that's widely discussed? And how do you find something new when they're all looking at the same age range as you? And what they're finding is after weaning, this is the process, the intestines, they do A, B, C, D, and you know, I can't use your jargon, so I'll use my simple terms. But you know, and the protein levels, as you've mentioned, amino acids. So why go into that? Why would your supervisor say go into it? You know, you'll find something new.
Very good question, and thank you for asking that question, because you know, when we talk about science, most people kind of think, why do you still have to research this? Why do you have to go into it? Because you know, this has been done before. But you know, the body of knowledge that we have in science, it's increased by that bit and bit and bit of research. You know, for the most part, I'll tell my colleagues that it's not about groundbreaking research or results. It's always about this bit and bit of ideas that contribute to the total body of, you know, what we see sometimes as a groundbreaking result. However, to answer your question, so if you check online all these journals, you find a lot of research on low protein diets in pigs. And the question is, why do we even want to feed low protein diet in pigs? So, well, you know, it helps with reducing nitrogen excretion, or let's say nitrogen pollution. The higher the protein you feed, the more the nitrogen pollution you have. So because when you break down protein in the body, urea nitrogen is one of, you know, urea nitrogen and nitrogen feces is one of the end products. So when you feed a lower protein, you reduce nitrogen excretion in diet and even urea nitrogen in urine in terms of pigs. The other thing is pigs typically, you know, when they are weaned, they may not be able to handle protein very well. So they may have post-weaning diarrhea. Okay. So you also want to reduce diarrhea in pigs. Now you see a lot of research on low protein diets. Okay. Then when you go into nucleotide supplementation of diet, you see a lot of research on nucleotide supplementation of pig diets. But one research gap myself and my wonderful PhD advisor we identified is that people, to the best of our knowledge, let me put that out there, is that researchers have not, you know, tend to ask the question of how about we feed low protein diet plus nucleotides?
Yeah.
So what is novel or what is new about our research is that we are combining two models, which is low protein diets and nucleotides. So most people that have done nucleotide studies that have supplemented nucleotide, they supplemented it on normal diet or high protein diets. They have not typically done low protein diet and nucleotides. So that is what is really novel about, you know, my study.
No, I agree with you. So that's what I found. But, you know, I'm not a specialist. I'm not an expert. Thank you very much for answering. So the next question is, what are the 3 interesting factors that you found while doing this research that you're like, wow, this is exciting and it's making me even more passionate about my research?
3 interesting things that I found about this research. Number 1, the first thing I would say is I have, you know, from theoretical aspect, I know that proteins are very important in diets, okay? But it's kind of fascinating. It's very interesting to see that in real life situation.
Okay.
And why are protein important in diet? The main reason why protein are important in diet is because they supply amino acids. Okay, that's the main reason why protein are important in diet. So even if you have a child and you feed them less protein, what you are depriving them of is amino acids.
Right.
Now, these amino acids, according to most people, from elementary school, they teach us that, protein helps with growth. But, that's a theory. You have to conduct a study to be very certain that, yes, protein help with growth. So when you reduce the protein diet, the protein level in a diet, you are reducing growth. So when you reduce growth, what my research is trying to focus on is, can we get back this growth by supplementing nucleotides? So when we reduce, so let me tell you the dilemma. The dilemma is that farmers don't want their pigs to have post-weaning diarrhea.
They don't.
Okay. Farmers don't want high nitrogen excretion into the environment. Let me say the environmentally conscious ones. Okay. So they are forced to reduce protein in the diet of their pigs. Now, when they reduce protein in the diet of their pigs, they're depriving their pigs of amino acids. In turn, their pigs don't grow as much as they should compared to other farmers that are not doing the same thing. Now, the dilemma is we want to reduce protein in their diet, but we also want them to grow. We want them to have everything they need for optimal growth. Now, what can we add back to the low protein diet to make sure that these animals, they are able to grow optimally? So people have looked at a bunch of things. They have supplemented a bunch of things. People have supplemented, crystalline amino acid, just put back the amino acid, but a chemical form. But we are like, okay, since nucleotides help with body development, tissue development, cellular proliferation or multiplication, how about we supplement this nucleotide? So one fascinating thing or one interesting thing I discovered in my research is that, when you reduce protein, indeed, you are reducing amino acid and you may be reducing the growth of the animals. Like real world example, not just the theoretical aspect, the practical one. The other thing that is so fascinating is that, for example, what you eat is who you are. Like if they take your blood sample now, and we get the blood serum or the blood plasma and we analyze it in the lab, your blood serum will reflect your diet. So overall, it's interesting to understand that diet influences a lot of things.
Right.
Your weight gain, your metabolism, your blood characteristics, your blood metabolites, a lot of things. So it's fascinating to see that, okay, in real world, you are what you eat. So, what I eat and what you eat defines what happens in our body overall. And the last thing is to also see the importance of amino acid. Either it is coming from the protein or it is coming from synthetic source, like chemicals. It's kind of interesting to see that amino acids like branch-chain amino acid, especially valine, isoleucine, and leucine, they are very important when it comes to growth. So those are the few things that I found very interesting and that motivated me. And of course, low protein diets, not just theoretically, practically reduces post-weaning diarrhea. That is also fascinating to see in real world example.
Yeah, that's quite interesting. So then I have a question. At the moment, in terms of farming in the UK, they're pushing, and the feeds, they're quite expensive. So some people are opting to make their own feeds, because if I have to pay, let's say, £250 and I'm selling my goat at 100 and I'm making a bit of cheese, I'm not getting a return of my investment, right? So I'm going to opt for a vegetarian diet because some guy on TikTok said it works, right?
Yeah.
Obviously, it hasn't been tested.
Yeah.
I'm not saying you've looked at this, just hypothetically speaking. if I'm going to opt for a vegetarian diet and there's no amino acids, I'm adding a few things here and there, will my animals be healthy and will they grow to their potential? Like, do we have human beings who are vegetarian and they're healthy? We can see them on the streets. Nothing's happened to them. Except for the two, I think they hiked Everest or something, and they passed away, unfortunately, hiking because I told them that you need protein. They were like, no, we've been vegetarians for a long time. Go on. I think it's Everest or a different one, but it's one of the big ones in terms of hiking. What are your thoughts on that?
Yeah, so are you talking about vegetarian diets for animals
For
like
animals,
pigs?
yeah. Yeah.
Huh. That's a very interesting question. Well, you see, one thing we should understand is that pigs, let me go with pigs because again, they are very good models similar to humans.
Of
Pigs
course.
are omnivores. They eat,
Mhm.
they eat plants, they eat flesh, they can eat a wide range of things.
Of course.
Now, I wouldn't recommend a vegetarian diet for pigs. And in
Mm.
fact, if you'll be giving a vegetarian diet to pigs, I would say you should make sure that you are meeting the amino acid requirements,
Mhm.
especially if you want your pig to grow optimally. There are a few amino acid requirements. We have something we call National Research Council
Mhm.
guideline. So
Yeah.
in that guideline, we have pigs according to their body weight. And these pigs, they have amino acid requirements. This has been compiled by respected professors in the field who have said, okay, for let's say a 5 kg pig to grow well, they need like 15 gram per kg of lysine. That's a
Mhm.
very essential amino acid for growth. So I would say that if you're feeding any diet, I might not care so much about the composition, the makeup, the experimental ingredients you are using. I care
Mhm.
so much about the dietary composition. So the
Mhm.
question is, this vegetarian diet, how much lysine do you have in it? How
Mhm.
much Another essential amino acid is methionine. How much methionine do you have in it? How much valine and isoleucine do you have in it? If
Mhm.
your vegetarian diet for pigs, if it can meet all these, requirements and
Mhm.
including the energy requirements, go ahead. But the question is, can this vegetarian diet meet this requirement? So if you're formulating your own diet, that's great. But you have to do like the analysis of this diet and make sure that you are meeting the requirements of your pigs based on their body weight. If you are not doing that, you'll be feeding and you discover that your pig will not be healthy and they won't grow as well. So yes.
Mhm. Quite interesting. But then I'm thinking, as a local farmer, I genuinely might not have that information and I might just do it because that's the only thing I can do. And someone has said basically it works. So I'll do what works essentially because it's a quick, strategy to help me balance my books. But that's a story for another day. So the next question is, when it comes to pigs, do you have different species? I know we have a wild boar, so I'm just thinking in my head, is there a specific species that, belongs to the US and one that belongs to Africa? Because I'm guessing that their reaction would be different if
Yeah.
that is the case, or are they all the same? Because this is not my field, you see.
Yeah, so that's a very good question. Well, pigs have, they have different species
Mm.
depending on the location. For
Right.
instance, the pigs I've always seen in Nigeria, like, um, do I really call them species? Well, let me say species. We have different
Mhm.
species for
Yeah.
sure. So the ones I saw in Nigeria were kind of smaller and just
Mhm.
like dogs. Let me say different breed.
Mhm.
I think breed would be a better
Yeah.
word. Different breed, because
Yeah.
I'm like, wait, different breed of pigs. We have different breeds. Just like you have in dogs and in goats and chickens, we have different breeds of pig. For instance, in Nigeria, for the most part, I saw Durocs, which are kind of
Mhm.
smaller. They can be black in color or brown. But when I came to US, I saw a lot of, landrans, American landrans. They are mostly like um pale skin or light skin. They tend to grow bigger. So, the breed also it kind of determines how big your pig can grow, their length, their height, the way so those breed can have different effects on whatever experiment you are doing. So we have things like Duroc, we have Yorkshire, we have American Landrans, we have Berkshire. So there are different breeds of pig, just like in every other, animals like chickens and goats, and we have different breeds. Yes.
So then the question becomes, can your study be replicated onto the different breeds? And also remember the temperature is different in the US compared to Europe. In certain parts of, let's say, Pakistan, it's colder, Liberia or Libya, So can it be, is that, something that can be done?
Yes, absolutely. For integrity of science, one of the ways to test it is repeatability, and if it can be replicated across the world. So yes, I strongly believe that this research can be replicated anywhere in the world. For the most part, and for our research, we basically use temperature and ventilation controlled environment. So if you want to replicate something like that, you may want to use a temperature and ventilation controlled environment. If you check our materials and method, so we declare everything that we do in our materials and method, so that scientists that read this paper in anywhere in the world, they can, take that paper and say, okay, they use this amount of, temperature and ventilation throughout the experiment. So I think if you go through our materials and method and you follow the same steps, you should be able to replicate it. Can breed have an impact on the response? I think so. That's a possibility. I can't say for sure. It's not something that I've tested experimentally, but I think, breed can have an impact. But for my own research, which is protein levels in diet, I think for the most part, all these breeds will respond similarly. They will respond in similar trends or similar fashion. I want to believe that, because it's difficult to think that if you give me very high protein diets and you give another person low protein diets, to think that we have the same body weight at the end of, let's say, 6 months. That would be incredible if that happens. It's commonsensical that the person who is eating the richer diet would have better growth and development. It's almost like comparing well-fed to underfed. So I believe that, protein levels in feed in animals should definitely have, an impact on the growth, on the blood serum metabolites, and all those other variables. So I think this can be repeated following the same steps. Yes.
So I feel like that's a research question in terms of replication for breed.
Yeah.
It's a publication possibly, which leads on to the next question. So do you feel fulfilled when you publish an article?
Well, interesting. Wow. So my idea or general outlook to life, especially for PhD students, is that publication shouldn't determine your joy or your happiness or your sense of fulfillment. It's great to publish papers. One of my papers just got accepted yesterday evening, so I was like, okay, this is exciting. I think I feel more fulfilled when I finish a study or an experiment and I kind of get interesting data compared to when I publish a paper. I've been very intentional about making sure that my sense of fulfillment doesn't come from publications. That's because sometimes you get rejection. And if your sense of fulfillment comes from that, when you get rejection, you might just go straight into depression. So for me, I derive fulfillment mostly from my field experiments and my lab work, because I enjoy doing them much more than I do when it comes to publication. For publication, for the most part, I believe this study will be published when you have a good research, and it's genuine, it's scientific, it's nice, it's even if you didn't get the results you were expecting, is part of research. When you submit it to a paper, if it gets rejected, you go back to the drawing table and say, what are the reviews that we got? What could we have done? Maybe you need to do more research. Maybe you need to do more experiment. You can submit it again and probably to another journal. So, that is just about it. But when it comes to like getting into the lab, doing the lab work, getting into the field, figuring things out, it makes you feel like a scientist, which I think is the fulfilling part of it. And it makes you feel like you are contributing something to the world of science. So yes, that gives me more fulfillment than publications. But I mean, I know if a good number of PhD students feel fulfilled, when they have publications and they're like, oh, I have 5 publications, but I think I get more joy from day-to-day activity than, the publication.
That's a very interesting but peculiar answer. And I think it links into your drive of always wanting to be a professor, because then you have to govern your feelings in order to survive this game of professorship.
Absolutely.
Essentially. So I
Absolutely.
applaud you for
Thank
that. The next question is, how do you cope with a difficult supervisor during your PhD?
Okay. How to cope with a difficult supervisor during your PhD? Well, I think I'm one of the few lucky ones. I have a very wonderful, supervisor. We have a very good working relationship, and I look up to him. I respect him a lot. But then I think if you have a difficult supervisor, one of the few things to do is to study this person you are working with. I particularly believe in studying people and know, what rubs them off the wrong way and what they really want. I believe in open communication as well. Like, I want to believe most people are reasonable. I want to believe most professors are, that you can sit down and talk to them. And I believe in like talking to your advisor or supervisor and asking questions like, what am I doing wrong? How can I improve? Are you satisfied with my progress and things like that? These are difficult questions. I know that personally. I'm okay with asking difficult questions, even from my superiors. So I think that can be a good way to cope with a difficult supervisor. I also think trying to be as much as possible as trying to be self-motivated can also be a very good way to deal with a difficult supervisor. Don't let comments get under your skin and things like that. For the most part, I tell my colleagues, if they approach me for advice, like, don't let these things get into your head. Being raised by a mom that kind of, I've always lived that way. I'm used to that. I don't let praises get so much into my head, and even the critics, I really don't let it get into my head. I'm like, okay, I just move on. I brush myself up. I'm like, I'll move to the next thing. So you might have a supervisor that is verbally abusive and will call you names and say you're not doing well, you are a disappointment and things like that. I think one of the ways to deal with that is to, get back up and try to do it again. And the last thing I would say is that for the most part, universities have, good ethics and good ethics board and things like that. People that can come in, people you can confide in. when the going gets tough, especially with your supervisor. So if you have sought every other ways of resolving these things, and you discover that your supervisor is just so difficult, you might want to approach the ethics committee and say, hey, I'm having a problem with my supervisor, and I don't really know how to fix this. Can you step in? I know a few PhD students that they have had to change their labs and their supervisors because they had a very difficult supervisor, and there was not just any way to kind of to like step in and help both sides. And the university board and ethics board, they're like, okay, what we'll do is to we find you a new lab, you can go to another lab, and your supervisor will have to let you go because it seems the two of you don't have a very good working relationship. So I think those three things would help. Yes.
Thank you very much for your response. And the next question is, to those who are applying. So when applying for a PhD, what are the top 3 things that I need to consider?
Oh, great. The top 3 things, I will speak from my own personal experience. The first thing, like you've asked, is your supervisor. I think it's important because, I don't know, you are your supervisor, if I can use this word, is like, and I'm using it very loosely, it's like you are married for the next 4 or 5 years. So that is someone you wake up to their emails, and sometimes maybe their text message and say, hey, so your supervisor is very, very important. The second thing I'll say is the lab culture. Especially for folks in science. And apologies to non-science, audience that may be watching this video. I believe you are doing, amazing job, fantastic things. But I'm just speaking from my own, my own field. I'll say for folks in science, I think the lab culture, the laboratory culture is very important. For instance, some supervisors, they are very intense. They want you to be in the lab as early as 8 a.m. and leave later in the evening. And some supervisors, I won't say they don't care, but they don't have strong opinion on that. If you show up, they don't really mind. If you don't come to the lab for several days a week, they don't mind. The only thing they care about is that you are delivering. You are doing your job. They don't care where you do it from. So I think the lab culture matters as well. Like, what is the lab culture? Do they expect us to work 24/7? Or is there, do I have downtimes or break times that I cannot show up to the lab and everything will be fine? So the supervisor, the lab culture, which is kind of very interconnected because most times the supervisor influences the lab culture. And I would say the third thing is perhaps, honestly, for a PhD, maybe funding. Maybe funding and the research, the funding. The question is the research, because you also want to make sure that you are doing what you like. Does your supervisor really believe in your research ideas? Is he open to your research ideas? Or the kind of research they're doing in their lab, is it something you genuinely like? Or do you just want to take it because, okay, I just want to have a PhD, I don't care what the research is? Oh, trust me, you might care at the end of the day, because it's not difficult to work on something you are not genuinely passionate about. And of course, the funding. So all these your research ideas, are there funding to like carry it out? Or is it just ideas and no fund, and you are like, okay, I have this idea, and it's always like, we don't have the fund to do this, because all this experiment and research takes money. So those are the things you should consider.
So I'm going to respond to you because I was taught Yoruba by a previous guest. Share you the get.
Oh, wow. Okay.
I get to practice.
That's nice.
The next question is, where do you see yourself in 5 years' time?
In 5 years' time? Interesting
yes, you're
question.
a planner.
In 5 years' time, I hope to be, honestly, anywhere around the world, impacting knowledge to the younger generation. Maybe as a faculty, teaching, the next generation of animal scientists or nutritionists, and conducting a cutting-edge research. And I'm choosing my word by saying that anywhere in the world, because personally, I love to travel. I could live anywhere. not just in the United States. In fact, if there is a good opportunity in my home country, Nigeria, I would love to teach in Nigeria as well. So I
Wow.
see myself teaching. I see myself teaching
Mhm.
and doing research in the next 5 years. Absolutely.
Oh, amazing. So this is the final question. You'll be glad to know. Do you think PhD hard talk is beneficial for students in terms of research students ourselves and also for the universities alike? Or do you think, Norma, call it a day, it's not working, it's done for, you're wasting your time? What are your thoughts?
Well, let me start by saying that I think you are doing a fantastic job. And I think PhD talk is doing amazing, especially for graduate students. Information is very powerful. It's very important. And you've asked a series of questions that I think is very important to people who want to apply for PhD and and also for people who are in animal sciences. And trust me, you have a lot of people that will be interested in these. So I think this platform provides it provides an avenue to like share what you are doing and how to go about PhD and how to undo challenging things in PhD. So that's a very noble cause. I think it's amazing. You are doing a very great job. And I am excited for people who have subscribed to your channel and will be getting a lot of all these things. So I would say more grease to your elbow. Just continue with the amazing work.
Oh, thank you very much, Abiola. Thank you for your time. If you're interested in contacting Abiola, all the details will be at the bottom of the screen, so you can scroll through. And if Abiola doesn't respond back, just know sometimes he's a bit busy. He's with the pigs, the baby pigs, I'll call them.
Of
He's
course.
literally playing with his babies,
Yeah,
conducting his experiments, but he will be in contact as soon as he's got time. And thank you
absolutely.
again. Remember, hashtag project dissemination to the world and hashtag sustainable knowledge to the world. Thank you so much for your time, Abiola.
Thank you for having me. Thank you so much.